Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Know Your English Grammar. I'm Paula, and today I will be teaching you the difference between farther and further, two commonly confused words in English. I will also tell you about the word furthermore, which is an extension of the word further. Farther and further are two words in English that look similar and may sound similar to most people, but if you pay close attention to the pronunciation, you will realize that they do sound differently. When you say farther, be sure to emphasize the AR. It's farther, farther, not farther. And the other one is further, further. The emphasis is on the UR, further. Both words mean to a greater distance. However, one relates to a physical distance and the other to a metaphorical or figurative distance. So now, let's look at what makes farther and further different in meaning. Farther refers to a physical distance at a greater distance away or advanced point. This distance can be measured physically because you are advancing from one point to another point. Farther is the comparative form of the adjective far. The superlative form is farthest. Far, farther, farthest. Not far, more far, or most far. And it can be used as an adjective or an adverb in sentences. To explain this better, let's look at some examples. The post office is farther down the road from the bank. In this sentence, we're saying that physically you have to go a greater distance down the road from where the bank is located to get to the post office. Farther is describing the post office being at a greater physical distance than the bank. The distance can be measured, such as in miles or kilometers. Here's another example. The sun is farther away from the earth than the moon. Here again, we are describing the sun being at a greater distance away from the earth than the moon. This distance can be measured. My car can travel farther on less gas than yours. In this sentence, farther is used as an adverb because it modifies the verb travel. It describes the greater distance that a car can travel, which refers to a physical distance that can be measured. And here's another example. We decided to drive farther to find a better spot to camp. Here again, we are speaking of the physical distance that we have decided to drive to find a better spot to camp. Now, let's look at further. Further refers to a metaphorical or figurative distance that is advanced at a greater degree or extent in a non-physical way. It's additional or more. But this distance cannot be measured physically. Further can be used as an adjective or a verb in a sentence. Let's look at some examples. We need to discuss this matter further. This means that the discussion will advance to a greater extent. Now, why couldn't we use farther? We could not use farther because the advancing of the discussion cannot be measured physically. It is not actual distance that can be measured. Here's another example. She took extra courses to further her education. This means she took her studies to a greater degree or extent to advance her education. This cannot be measured physically. And here's another example. The project cannot proceed without further research. This means additional or more research is needed, but we cannot measure how much more research is needed. So, do we say how much farther should we go or how much further should we go? Both sentences are correct if left as is. But if we want to be absolutely sure about which word we should use, we have to provide additional information. If our sentence was, how much farther or further down the road should we go, then our correct word would be farther, because we are speaking of physical distance. The distance from the beginning of the journey to down the road can be measured, so we use farther. On the other hand, if our sentence was, how much farther or further should we go with this conversation, then the correct word would be further. This is asking if we need to have additional conversation. This cannot be measured physically. So we have looked at farther and further. But what about furthermore? How do we use furthermore in our speech and writing? Furthermore is an adverb. It is written as one word and it is essentially an extension of the word further. So as we learned just now, further on its own means in addition or to a greater extent. When you add more to it, forming furthermore, it emphasizes the idea of adding more information or continuing the point being made. It may also introduce a new point from the end of the first point. So here's an example to show how they build on each other. Using further, we need to revise the budget further. This means we need to continue the revision of the budget. Now, using furthermore, the budget needs revision. Furthermore, we must also consider other expenses. By using furthermore, we are adding additional information to this thought. In this way, furthermore grows out of further to emphasize additional points in a discussion. And here's an example to show how a new point is introduced. I do not have transportation to get to the party. Furthermore, I'm not invited as yet. I do not have transportation to get to the party is point 1. Furthermore, I'm not invited as yet introduces an additional point to point 1. Here's another example. The project is running on schedule. Furthermore, we expect to finish on the budget. Furthermore, we expect to finish on the budget introduces additional information. So now that you know the difference between farther and further, and when we should use furthermore, let's do a practice exercise. Remember, we use farther for physical distance. Think of far, and you will remember it easily. And we use further when we are speaking of distance figuratively. For our exercise, I have given you 8 sentences, and you should fill in the blanks with farther, further, or furthermore. I will read through the sentences, then you may pause the video, write down your answers, and then we will go through them together. Number 1. I can throw the ball blank than you. Number 2. She wants to blank her education by studying abroad. Number 3. The blank end of the field is where we will set up the tents. Number 4. The campsite is just a little blank up the trail. Number 5. This book is well written. Blank, it's very informative. Number 6. There will be no blank delays in the project. Number 7. We have already received confirmation for the meeting. Blank we will finalize the schedule by Friday. And number 8, the blank you go, the less crowded it gets. Now, let's go through the answers together. Number 1, I can throw the ball farther than you. We use farther because we are speaking of physical distance. My ball can advance in distance from your ball, and that distance can be measured. Number 2, she wants to further her education by studying abroad. We use further because we are speaking about advancing her education, which cannot be physically measured. Number 3, the farther end of the field is where we will set up the tents. Farther is used because we have physical locations to the end of the field. This can be measured. Number 4, the campsite is just a little farther up the trail. Here again, we can measure distance from the campsite to up the trail. Number 5, this book is well written. Furthermore, it's very informative. Why do we use furthermore? We are given additional information. We know about the book that it is well written. And then we are given more information about the book. We are told it's very informative. So we use furthermore. Number 6, there will be no further delays in the project. We use further. We are saying there will be no more delays. This cannot be measured physically. Number 7, we have already received confirmation for the meeting. Furthermore, we will finalize the schedule by Friday. One point was already established. We have already received confirmation, and now we are going on to another point, which is that we will finalize the schedule by Friday. So we use furthermore. And number 8, the blank you go, the less crowded it gets. Is this further or farther? We could say either could be used in this sentence, but the information that is given saying the less crowded it gets tells us that we are moving from one physical point where there is a crowd to another physical point where there is less crowd. So the distance can be measured. So the correct answer would be farther. The farther you go, the less crowded it gets. Well, that's it for this lesson. I hope you found it useful. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't done so as yet. Please let me know in the comments how many you got out of 8. Also, write me your sentences using farther, further, and furthermore. And watch these videos on commonly confused pairs of words in English. Thank you very much for coming, and I will see you for the next lesson. Bye.